featured list variable. So after we run the for loop, the featured list variable will now not only contain the unordered list, but it will also contain the list elements including the titles, and that will be placed inside this unordered list. But initially on line 14 up to line 14 we will have an empty unordered list without any sort of list elements or any sort of titles, just with the class name, and that's it. We will have an empty unordered list. But after we run the loop, our unordered list will be filled with all the 5 titles enclosed in their respective list elements. So now we are telling the compiler, find out the list handler inside this HTML document and take this featured list. Sorry, I didn't include the entire name. And take this entire featured list, which now contains the unordered list, including the list elements of titles, including the list of titles, and place that title in on top of this list handler, which is erase this list handler and paste the entire unordered list along with the list of titles instead of this list element. So if you're interested in learning about this replace element, this is a JavaScript core API function. You can head over to the W3C Schools website. You will find out JavaScript string replace method. This is a method that can be used with string. So you might be wondering, where did we get that string on our script? Remember that in this variable HTML page, we have already processed this raw HTML content into a string. We have turned it into a string, and then we have included that inside this variable. And also remember that each of our title are also lists. So this featured list will now contain a string of titles, a list of strings that are actually titles. So we won't have a problem if we just include this featured list, which will contain an entire collection of titles encapsulated in list elements and included inside this unordered list, and that will replace this list handler, which is also a string. Now, if you're interested in learning about this replace method, then you should head over to this W3C School. And what it actually basically tells you that if you create a variable called str and you assign the string value of visit Microsoft, then on the next variable, you call in the string variable and you apply the replace method on that string variable. So now what you're telling the compiler is that look for the Microsoft string inside this str variable. So the compiler looks inside this inside this variable and finds that there is something called Microsoft inside this variable. Then this replace method tells the compiler through its second argument that replace that Microsoft name, replace that Microsoft string with the W3C Schools. That is placed in, and then place it inside this str variable. Now the compiler will exactly do that, and then when you print out the result, you will find out that you have got something like visit W3C Schools instead of visit Microsoft. So that's really simple. So that's exactly what we are doing. This entire variable is not an array. This is a entire string. So the string will actually look something like this. At the first instance, it will have, for the demonstration's purpose, let me create this like this. So it will have something like this. Class and it will have the class name as featured list. So this statement in here is essentially creating a variable that contains a string value as an assigned value to this variable. So this, when the compiler renders or reads or calculates this expression, it's going to turn it into a string like this. But as I was talking about, this unordered list does not contain any sort of list element. After we run the loop, it will now contain all the 5 list element along with the title. So it will now become something like this. Let me just copy this over. Okay, now it won't stay empty. It will be looking something like list, and then it will have the first element like this, and then I'm just showing you with one of the titles, but you're going to have all the 5 titles listed into one single string like this. Okay, so after this loop has run, or after the loop has finished its processing, then you will have a variable that will look something like this. But because I'm just showing this for this demonstration purpose, I'm just showing it with one of the titles, but you will, when the loop has finished running, you will have all the titles encapsulated like this, encapsulated with the list element, like the one that I'm showing you right now. So because we are telling the compiler that look into this HTML page variable. This HTML page variable is a string, because we have taken this content and we have turned it into a string using this toString method by applying this toString method on this raw